Back and neck pain, lifting the burden. And you know, when you go to see a doctor, you get, 10 minutes? And part of that's while he works on his paperwork, maybe 15 minutes. And he's sometimes in front of the computer, and he doesn't have a chance to tell you the whole story and what's going wrong with you and why it happened and what you can do to improve on it. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do, is teach people why it happened and what you can do to improve yourself. So I want to tell you a story about a patient, and that's the other thing you don't get when you go to the doctor, is a long story about all his patients. But here's a patient of mine. I mean, that's not him, but I put that in for an illustration. We'll call him George. George was having trouble with his back, and he came to see me as a second opinion. He was really tired of being called the invalid around his house, as his teenage kids called him. And he wasn't doing too well on his job at Walmart, where he was stocking shelves. And so he had come to see me. I thought he probably came to see me to get disability. Second opinion. Well, his story was that 5 years earlier, he had been hauling oil to people's houses for heating. He had been pulling the hose across the snow, slipped and fell down a set of stairs into somebody's basement, and he was in trouble. And once he got out of that mess, he went to see the doctor, and he was laid up and he was off work. And when he went to see the doctor, they treated him with some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory pills. They sent him to physical therapy. Didn't get better. They did an MRI. When they did an MRI, they found that he had something wrong with his back that they felt surgery would help. And so they sent him off to the surgeon, and the surgeon looked at him and said, well, hey, cha-ching, yes, we'll do surgery. And so, yes, he got surgery, and for about 6 months he did better, but then it was back to square one. Pain in the back, aching pain, pain that seemed to take away all his energy, pain that radiated down his hips and down his legs a bit, and he was off work again. He went to see the doctor. They gave him more pills, anti-inflammatories, sent him to physical therapy. It didn't help. They got another MRI. Wasn't anything that needed operated this time. And he was just not doing well. He started switching from job to job, and that wasn't working. And they put him on narcotic pills. They put him on more physical therapy. They gave him steroid injections in his back, we call epidurals. No help. And then about a year before I saw him, he went to see another spine surgeon, got an MRI, and then nothing became of that. And finally he came to see me, second opinion, possibly to get disability. So George was in trouble. He told me that his family called him the invalid. His teenage boys who went out and played basketball would really like him to come out and play with them, and he'd really like to go and play basketball with them, but just wasn't going to work. As he would stock the shelves at Walmart, he'd have to stop, and the pain would be in his back, and he'd be taking time off from time to time. And he just felt like at 52, life was passed him by, that he was, fixing to, have to stay home from now on. Just really wasn't planning in middle age to be laid up like this. So we're going to come back to George and tell you a little bit more about him. But let's talk about back pain and how it's related to all this. Back pain, big problem for Americans. Second most common cause for an office visit to any physician. Usually they go see a family doc first, but then they see an orthopedist or a physiatrist. 60 to 80% of the population will have a major low back pain episode in their lifetime. 15 to 20% will have back pain each year. These are people that know that every year they're going to, quote, throw their back out. 1% of the U.S. population are disabled. I mean, they're at home with this back pain. They don't get back to work. They are laid up. And the cost to our society is upwards of $60 billion a year. Back pain is the most expensive diagnosis for a work comp injury because of all the treatments. And, of course, surgery is a huge bill if you have surgery. All right, so what is the epidemiology of low back pain? Continuing. Second most common cause of disability in the United States. For men, it's the leading cause. At any given time, about 16.5% of total disabilities in those over 18 involves the back. And so people are laid up with this. And what about this disability? Well, we work on getting people back to work in a hurry. I mean, 95% of patients return to work within 3 months. That's good. And it might seem like when you come to the doctor and you have back pain, they're sort of pushing toward getting you back to work. There's a reason for that. If you don't get back to work right away, as fast as you can, like within 3 weeks, then you tend to kind of fall into this category of people who will take a long time to get back to work. So it's sort of a poor prognostic factor. And so 20% return to work after 1 year of disability. So we've lost a lot of people along the way if you're off that long, and then if you're off 2 years, only 2% return to work. And after 2 years, it's almost impossible to get somebody back to work if the back has been the issue, because they've been told, you know, your back gets destroyed, you'll never be the same. And they believe it. And it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's talk about some of the risk factors that we're dealing with here. What are the risk factors for low back pain? Oh, driving. Truck drivers. You sit there all day long. You eat the worst kind of food. And you don't get any exercise. And you just bounce in the seat. Sedentary occupations, like sitting at a desk and working on a computer or anything like that where you're not moving around. Vibrations. Of course, that would be like a truck, but there's other things that give you vibrations. Smoking. In fact, on an MRI, you can almost pick out the smokers from the non-smokers by the degeneration in their backs. I had a patient who was trying to get more disability, and his lawyer came to me to talk about his disability, and asked me what I thought, and I said, "Is he still smoking?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Of course he'll have back pain and disability." He says, "Really? How can you say that?" So I pulled out a journal article, and here it was. They could tell the difference on the MRI between those who smoked and those who didn't smoke because of the degeneration in their discs. Previous full-term pregnancy. Pregnancy tends to have these hormones that relax every ligament in your body, including those around the spine, and can lead to some interesting alterations in the spine that lead to pain. Physical inactivity. Increased body mass, weighing more. And tall stature. Well, wait a minute. Where's the risk factor that says I lifted too much? Where's the risk factor that says that I worked too hard? It's really people who aren't working, who are out of shape, who are out of, not getting their exercise. And what causes the low back pain? Well, we have this strain or sprain thing. Affects about 70% of people. It's where a ligament gets strained in the back, or a muscle, or maybe even a tendon or something. Degenerative changes can be involved. This is where the discs maybe get worn out a bit, or the facet joints between the vertebrae get worn out. It's sort of like arthritis in your spine. And then there's herniated discs that stick out where they're not supposed to. Well, this is sort of dangerous because the discs are supposed to stay confined to their space between the bones. And if they start swelling and getting bigger, there's all kinds of dangerous things to hit. Nerves. All kinds of nerves. And I'll show you some pictures of that here in a little bit. And if you break something, that's not a good thing. That'll cause pain. And osteoporosis is a big cause of fractures. As people get older, they're more likely to get fractures from osteoporosis. And then there's spinal stenosis. Oh, what's stenosis? Stenosis is when the space for the nerve roots or the cord gets too small. Stenosis. Shrinks down the space. The canal gets smaller. And then there's spondylolisthesis. So what's that? You know when you list to one side or the other? You've heard of listing? Well, spondylo means your spine. List means to sort of slide around. And what happens is your vertebrae slide around on each other and get out of alignment. Now, can this happen easily? No. Does this happen every day and you go to the spine realignment shop and they realign it for you? Well, there's some spine realignment shops that profess that, but let me tell you, they don't realign that easily. Sometimes we do surgery to realign them, and it's quite a process. All right, so other causes, and I'm just going to throw up a few here that aren't really that big a deal, but because you can see how low the percentages are, but I just want you to know about them. And that's spondylolysis. That's deterioration of the ligaments. And then there's discogenic low back pain. The disc is just causing the pain. Traumatic fracture. You know when you've got that, automobile accident. Congenital disease, that's very rare. Much less than that even. Cancer, and hopefully that's rare. And there's certain cancers that go to bone. Prostate cancer, breast cancer, and those kind of things. Inflammatory arthritis, and so people can have an inflammatory back pain. Rheumatoid arthritis can affect the back. Ankylosing spondylitis. There's a whole list of the rheumatic diseases, inflammatory diseases, and we have a whole lecture on that. And then infections, and that happens in people who are doing drugs or have heart valve problems. But let's talk about some of the things that people end up doing that hurt themselves. One of the things is lifting things wrong. That'll lead to the sprain or strain in your back, and that will give you problems. Now he's, bending his knees, keeping his back straight, and picked up his safe full of money, and that's all right. But these people here, he's doing something funny there with his books, and he's going to end up with problems. Now she's got her stack of books close to her, and that's good. So the mechanics are good. All right, posture has a lot to do with it too. And you notice she's sitting up straight. She's in a chair where her legs are out straight in front of her. Her feet are flat on the floor. Her arms are a little bit down from her elbows. And so she'll do fine. These guys, of course, are kidding themselves. They certainly wouldn't have a job where they had to sit like that for hours and hours. They look like college kids just home from class or something and playing around. But if you ended up working like that, you could be at a higher risk of back pain. And by the way, the worst thing you can do is sit in a chair, reach forward and pick up something heavy and sit back up. That'll put more pressure on your discs than any other position and way of lifting. Well, so I've just given you all the book answers about back pain. Now let's talk about some of the real causes of back pain and what you can do about them. And I'll continue with our friend George and tell you about what we did for him. But why does back pain really happen, other than the book answers? It has a lot to do with the anatomy of the back. If we look at the spine, here are some vertebrae. And there's a disc between each set of vertebrae. And here's a vertebra. Now this disc is very much alive, and so it needs to have some interaction with the outside world through blood flow. But there's an interesting thing about these discs, and that is there is only blood flow to the outside edge of the disc. The middle of the disc doesn't have blood vessels running through it. And so it's very vulnerable to not having good blood supply. If you looked at the top of the disc down from above, you would see that there are blood vessels all the way around the edge, but nothing here in the middle. And so this makes the disc very vulnerable to not getting its nutrition. You have to get nutrition in, and you have to get waste products out. If you thought of it like a sink, and you wanted water to get in the sink, you'd have to have a good flow of water into the sink. That would be like the blood flow. And you'd have to have a good drain where the water could go out of the sink. Anything that plugs the drain is going to make the water fill up the sink and overflow, and you have troubles. And so we call it a problem of perfusion, blood flow in, and elimination, blood flow out. Anything that changes the blood flow in your back is going to give you problems. Well, what kind of things, first of all, slow blood flow? One of the things is if you have your blood cells all stuck together. If they all get stuck together so that they can't flow through those little capillaries in your back, then you'll end up with more back problems. And so eating refined foods, for example, will cause all the blood cells to stick together. Here's a normal blood cell all by itself. And on a good day, they should all be by themselves, flowing through the capillaries, one at a time. and bringing nutrition to those discs and taking waste products away. But when you eat refined foods, oh, but we're refined people. Shouldn't we be eating refined foods? Well, no. And when you eat refined foods like sugar, refined oils, and so forth, you end up with these cells all stuck together. We call it a rouleau. And then they don't make it through the blood vessels very good to your back, and your back starts starving, and you end up with more back pain and more deterioration and a harder time getting the back to recover. You can have plugged pipes as well from inflammation. Now, in your back, you have a problem, an unusual thing that happens. You know, everywhere else in your body, if you have two blood vessels come together, they kind of come together at a Y. A nice angle, because the blood's going to flow on. But the blood vessels coming off your aorta, your big blood vessel here, to the back, come off at a right angle. So aorta here, and the blood vessels going to the back come off at a right angle. Well, this creates turbulence right here in the blood flow. And then turbulence is a spot where more plaque can develop. And so the back is very vulnerable to having plaque build up right where the blood vessels are coming off to feed your spine. Also, if you get inflammation, and here's inflammation building up around a blood vessel, it tends to squeeze the blood vessel off. And as the inflammation squeezes the blood vessel off, then less and less blood comes to your spine, and so your spine deteriorates. And so if you do work out real hard and you cause a little damage to your discs, they don't repair. And the next time you work out, the damage accumulates, and you keep getting worse and worse. Anything that plugs the pipes, if you please. And plugged pipes, we're talking plaque. Of course, this is sort of an illustration here, but plaque can develop anywhere in your blood vessels, and it's very likely to develop in your aorta. Sometimes we take an x-ray of somebody for a chest x-ray, and we find more calcium in their aorta than is in their spine. Oh, and when this happens, all that calcium can be plugging up blood vessels, but we know if it's in the aorta, it's probably in other blood vessels in the body as well. Another thing that can give you trouble is if you're eating food that is very high in fat and very low in fiber. We call it slow transit food. Slow transit because it takes a long time to get from your mouth through you. And when the food is slow in transit, it's sort of like a medium for growing bacteria. And these bacteria, well, they're right there in the bowels, and the blood vessels to the bowels go right by the spine, and so a lot of times there can be what we call referred pain or radiating pain. Bowel pain can refer to the back. Pancreatic pain from pancreatitis refers to the back. Gallstone pain can refer to the back. But in this case, if you're eating food that's high in fat and low in fiber, the bacteria overgrow, they create inflammation, they create constriction of the blood vessels, and they create all kinds of problems for the back. Now, there's something that happens in your body when you get scared, or you get worried, or you get angry. And this is something we call shunting. Now, shunting is when you take blood away from something that needs it and send it to something that maybe doesn't need it. Well, at least that's what the spine will tell you when the body takes blood away from the spine and sends it over to your brain or something. And shunting happens anytime you have the fight-flight reflex. All of a sudden something scares you. You don't need blood where it's wasting time like in your back. You need blood at your adrenal glands, you need blood in your heart, you need blood in your brain, you need blood in different places, but your back, your knees, your elbows, you're trying to survive. And so it shunts the blood away from those areas. Well, there's certain chemicals that will mimic this, that will cause that shunting to happen. And in this case, we have different things like coffee with the caffeine. The caffeine takes the blood away from the peripheral blood flow. We call it peripheral vasoconstriction. and brings the blood to the center of you, where you feel alive and awake, but your back is screaming and hollering and saying, "Stop that! I need my blood back." But there's other things that will do it too. I put up here amines, vasoactive amines. This is like tyramine. Tyramine causes the same thing. Where does tyramine come from? Cheese, wine, things like that. Tobacco does the same thing. It shunts the blood away from peripherally and your back to other parts of your body. But the stress is a big one that all these chemicals are mimicking. Stress will do it to you. I can't stress this enough. It's a huge problem. Here's an interesting book on it called Deadly Emotions by Don Kohlberg. Very interesting book, where he goes through and documents mind-body connection disorders and how thoughts affect your body. And in there he gives an illustration about one of his friends who did a whole lifetime of research on low back pain. And this gentleman was a physician who was the head of a physical therapy department at some big hospital. And his job was to take care of a lot of low back pain patients and to prescribe for them what physical therapy to get. Well, he started figuring out that most of the time they were doing no good for the low back pain patients. I mean, you send them in, they write up their prescription, no matter what they do, very small percentage of them would get better. So he was kind of getting discouraged with that, and so he said, "Oh, we got to figure out why this is really happening, because we're doing no good. If we're doing no good, then, this is a big waste of time." And so he started studying them. Well, he looked at them, he talked to them, he worked with them, and finally decided, let's do a study on it. And after they did a study, they compared doing physical therapy to doing no physical therapy, and sure enough, they were doing no good. It made no difference. And so then out came the MRIs. And in the 80s, they were doing a lot of research on people with MRI, and so they got everybody downtown to go through the MRI, and these were normal people that had happy lives and no pain or anything, and they ran them through the MRI, and 40% of them looked like they needed a spine surgery. Well, then he started asking the question, well, why then are we operating on the ones we are operating on? Well, that makes no sense. Maybe we're operating on the wrong people, because spine surgery didn't have that good of outcome either. And so then he started thinking, well, the people really hurt, and they're not faking that, and a lot of them, the pain is keeping them from things they would like to be doing, so it's not secondary gain. So then he started looking at this from the point of view of psychological impact. So he sent all his patients to a psychologist. And lo and behold, they had a lot of issues. And he started looking at that and saying, well, but sure they have issues, but what's the mechanism by which they have the pain? So then he started doing more research. He started doing PET scans and blood flow scans, where they would take these patients that had low back pain and study them, and they discovered something. They discovered that these people were actually turning off the blood to their discs, turning off the blood to their muscles, turning off the blood to the nerves, tendons, and ligaments back there. And this was causing pain through lack of oxygen, just like a heart attack. Well, he said, well, that's interesting, but this still doesn't explain why they would be doing that. Or what's the mechanism? Or we know that, okay, we have the mechanism, the blood shutting down. So then he started looking at it from the mind-body connection, and with the help of his psychologist, he discovered that what happened is when these people were under tension or stress, and the worst type of tension or stress was from having had been abused as a child, but there's all kinds of sources of tension or stress, that this tension or stress was then reflected down the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and that was the link between the mind and the body, and that these nerves were causing the blood vessels to tighten up their muscles and shutting off the blood. He says, okay, well, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to solve the problem? How are we going to make it so these folks improve? Well, he thought about it a while, and he said, well, I'm going to try something. There was a lot of cognitive behavior therapy being practiced, and he thought, well, this is a good approach. And so he put together a 2-day seminar on low back pain. He started out by talking about the physiology, the anatomy of the back, and then the mind-body connection and the physiology behind why stress was making the blood vessels clamp down. And then he decided, and then he would talk about what kind of things usually cause the stress that led the body to do this. And then he ended up talking about how to overcome the stress. Very interesting, because he did this on a whole group of patients, and he followed them for a while, and he discovered that he had 85% success rate at curing low back pain. The mind-body connection was huge. Does spine surgery have that kind of success? No, you're lucky if you get 50%. Does physical therapy have that kind of success? No, it's a little better than placebo. And so there's this huge mind-body connection part to low back pain. And so recognizing that helps a person to start thinking about how to deal with that. This book gives some ideas about how to deal with that. But I found it interesting that the Bible talks a little bit about this. Here I'm looking at Jeremiah 15, 17, and 18, where he said, I stayed by myself and was filled with anger. And then he says, why do I keep on suffering? Why are my wounds incurable? Why don't they heal? It's interesting, the connection between anger and unhealing wounds or, constant pain. Psalms has a similar thing. Here we're looking at Psalms 129. And David ended up getting chased by Saul quite a bit and had a pretty stressful life in his youth. And he says, sorely have they afflicted me from my youth, yet they have not prevailed against me. I've escaped every time. But then the next verse he says, the plowers plowed upon my back. They made long their furrows. And so apparently he had back pain, and it must have been related to his stress from his youth. Studies of people who have learned to appreciate forgiveness, accept forgiveness from God, and to give forgiveness to other people have shown they do better. Back pain patients who have learned by experience the value of forgiveness have less pain, less anger, and less psychological distress. It's been found that the anger resulting from a lack of forgiveness has the greatest impact on these low back pain patients. Patients who have the hardest time forgiving others are at the highest risk of back pain and psychological distress. People who have jobs where they hate their bosses or hate the work, they're at higher risk of all these back pain issues. Well, now let's look at the back here for a little bit on an MRI. An MRI is merely a study that shows you how much water there is in different tissues. Well, here's a bright white streak, and that's where your spinal fluid is. Here's the vertebra, and here's a vertebra, and here's a vertebra. And you see that there? Does that make sense to you? We'll teach you how to read MRIs here, huh? Anyway, so here's a vertebra, and here's a white disc. At least it's got water in it. And here's a vertebra, and here's a white disc. These are normal discs. These discs are like they should be. Notice that they don't stick out in the back here. But here's one that's totally black. And here's one that's totally black. These discs have no water in them. They're dried out. And this is a huge problem also for creating low back pain, because as they run out of water, it's sort of like a tire on your car running out of air. And when the tire on your car runs out of air, it starts to bulge out to the sides. And luckily, there's nothing for it to hit out the sides in your car, at least down by the ground. But in your back, when the disc bulges, then it can start hitting nerves right back here in the back. And if those discs got very big, then it would be a big problem. Well, so we have to rehydrate those discs. Okay, obesity. When you weigh more, just like weighing more affecting your knees, because your knees are, made to only handle so much weight. What happens if you take a half-ton truck and you put 2 tons of rocks in it? Well, there goes your warranty, right? The manufacturer will tell you, you're on your own, you go doing that kind of thing. Well, somehow we need a manual with a label on our knees that says, this one only handles at most 100 pounds, and this one at most handles 100 pounds, and any weight over that is going to void your warranty. Well, this is what happens. And you start picking up heavy objects, you might be in trouble. Obese people have a higher incidence of back pain. Part of it has to do with the excess weight they put on their discs all the time. When you're younger, you know, you're taller in the morning than you are at night. Anybody ever measure themselves in the morning and then measure themselves at night? The younger you are, the more it changes because your discs are still, you know, not totally desiccated. Yeah, you're more flexible. So the discs during the day get squished. But if you're way overweight, they're squished all the time and they don't recover as well at night. And this is a problem. They don't rejuvenate as quickly. And so they're more likely to become dried out as well. Well, there's a few red flags I want you to know about. Things that would raise a question. You know, if you've had a history of cancer and you start getting low back pain, we wonder, okay, is your cancer someplace we don't want it to be? Like your spine? If you're losing weight rapidly, that could be an infection or cancer or something like that. If you have osteoporosis, then we're thinking, well, maybe you fractured something. And that's a different story. Prolonged use of prednisone will make you have osteoporosis and more likely to break a bone. Older age, people tend to accumulate their diseases from bad health habits over time, and as they get older, they're more likely to get cancer or osteoporosis. Major trauma. Intravenous drug use. If you're using drugs intravenously, it's always dangerous, and these folks that do that tend to lick their needles and then they stick it in their arm, and whatever they lick the needle with goes to the heart and starts growing, and then it goes to the back and starts growing, and you get this huge infection in the spine, and that will be a major cause of pain. And a fever could indicate an infection. Back pain at rest or at night could be more cancer. Bowel or bladder dysfunction. And the reason I mention that is because if you're all of a sudden your bowel or bladder function goes, then it's sort of a medical emergency. You need to get to the hospital, get an MRI, and if it's a disc pinching the nerve to go into your bladder, you have about 6 hours to take care of it, or you'll be permanently without control of your bladder. All right, when do I do surgery? When should I do surgery on people? All right, indications. Loss of bowel or bladder control and progressive motor loss are big indications. Uncontrollable pain is sort of a soft indication, but it's important. What's the outcome of surgery? How about all these discs they take out? Now they take them out percutaneously or with a laser or something. Well, in 2 years, it really makes no difference most of the time. Majority of surgeries, all they do is get people back to work a little bit earlier, but in the long run, at 2 years, the outcome's no different than if they didn't operate. Let's get back to talking about George. So I had George in my office. George was, well, kind of hinting that he might like to be on disability, but I said, no, you know, you told me you'd like to be out there with their teenage boys playing basketball, and you're tired of being called the invalid, and so I kind of detected that you'd really like to get back to life. You're not really wanting to go on disability if you didn't have to. And he said, well, that's right. I said, would you like to try something? Would you be willing to try something and see if we can get you over your back pain and get you back to work, back to playing with the kids, back to doing well? He says, yeah, I'd like to try something. I said, would you be willing to try anything? He said, well, yeah. I said, how about for a week? 1 week. He says, yeah, I'd be willing to try anything for a week. I said, all right. So basically in 1 week we're going to reverse 5 years of back pain, failed surgery, failed physical therapy, failed epidural steroids, failed narcotics and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. In 1 week we're going to take this guy and put him back to normal. So I said, all right, take out a piece of paper. I'm going to put you on a very regimented program that we'll try for 1 week. It may not be something that we're going to have you do the rest of your life, but this is going to be a very strict program for a week. He says, okay. And so I handed him a piece of paper and a pen, and I started writing down too. And there's our piece of paper there. And I said, all right, first thing you do is when you get up in the morning is I want you to drink 2 glasses of water. And when you drink this water, you want to have big glasses, like 12-ounce glasses. And then you don't want to eat for about a half hour. But then when you eat your breakfast, I have a special program for your breakfast. At breakfast, I want you to eat nothing but oatmeal for the next week. Now, by nothing but oatmeal, I mean you can put some things in your oatmeal, like soy milk or nuts or raisins, but I don't want any added oil, no margarine, no sugar, but just oatmeal. And then I want you to take a vitamin C tablet. He worked at Walmart. I said, get your vitamin C there. 500 milligrams right after breakfast. And then immediately upon completing breakfast, I want you to take a walk for 10 minutes. 10-minute walk. Come rain, shine, snow, and it was winter. Yeah, it was snowing. So just put on the right clothes. Just go out and do it. And so walk for 10 minutes. Then, 2 hours after breakfast or mid-morning, drink 2 more glasses of water. And these 2 glasses of water, again, large glasses. Then at lunchtime, we have a special plan for your lunch. And that is, we want you to eat only vegetables. And preferably raw, but the idea especially is not to have any oil or excess salt. So for this week, salads would be great, but don't put vinegar and oil on them. Put things like, olives or sunflower seeds or something else. But don't put on these dressings that have all these things in it that aren't particularly helpful. And then another vitamin C after lunch, and another 10-minute walk after you've finished. And then after the 10-minute walk, mid-afternoon, get 2 more glasses of water, large glasses. And then at supper time, I want you to make sure and eat your supper at least 3 hours before you go to bed. And then for supper, just fresh fruit, raw fruit. Cantaloupe and watermelon and apples and bananas and strawberries and whatever, but just raw fruit. And make sure it's 3 hours before bedtime. Another vitamin C before you go for your walk. Then take your walk for 10 minutes immediately after eating. And then 2 glasses of water 2 hours after supper. And then at bedtime, and for the whole day, no coffee, tea, sodas. Luckily he didn't smoke. No alcohol, no eating between meals. And then I said, if you do get hungry between meals, then drink ice water. And so we had his plan, and I got through writing it. He got through writing it all down, and he says, okay. I said, you think you can do that? He says, yeah, I think I can do that. Well, he was a Mainer. He was very stoic, and as he left, I'm thinking, yeah, he's not going to do that. He'll probably say, this guy was nuts. I'm going to go find a real doctor. And so he left, and I thought, yeah, we won't see him. So the next week, he's going to come back in a week. Next week, he was on my list of patients, and I thought, wonder if he's going to come back. What about exercises? Other than walking, I didn't really give him any exercises, did I? I didn't tell him to bend and stretch and do all these kind of things, and you might wonder about that. Well, in most of the studies, just like physical therapy is a little better than placebo, so is bending and stretching and so forth for back pain. Now, there is benefit to exercise to developing your back so you don't strain it and don't come up with the incident, but as far as overcoming the back pain, it's not that helpful. But let's talk about the bending and stretching and so forth that helps with avoiding back pain. And so all kinds of stretching helps. The goal is to keep yourself limber so that the more limber you are, the less likely you are to sprain or strain something. If you're too stiff, then you're more likely, to break or to tear something. And so the goal of stretching is to improve your flexibility and especially the muscles and the other soft tissues of the back. This reduces stiffness and improves the range of motion so that when you're lifting something, you're not out at the end of your flexibility and then something pushes you over the edge and you end up with a tear or a stretch or a strain. Flexion exercises, like she's doing there, bending forward, are helpful. And the way they're helpful is they tend to strengthen the abdominal muscles and the buttock muscles, reducing the load on the spine. They stretch the back and hip muscles. A lot of people have very tight hamstrings. This helps with those. They widen the spaces between the vertebrae. As you lean forward, the space widens, and that reduces pressure on any nerves back there. And this helps to relieve pain sometimes. You don't want to do sudden or, vigorous forward flexion. No, manipulation. You want to do it slow and easy. Aerobic dancing wouldn't be helpful. Rowing could raise the pressure in the discs. Another rowing would be pulling really hard in this position. And you wouldn't want to do that, because that would be like, like I said, sitting and lifting something puts the most pressure on your discs. The other type of exercises are extension, and these are classic ones we prescribe for back pain. And this extension exercises are very helpful. Why? Well, they open up the spinal canal and develop the muscles that support the spine. And extension exercises may minimize pain that radiates from your back to other parts of your body. So we have people do this, getting the muscles stretched out in the front and tightening the muscles in the back. Very helpful. What about aerobic exercise? Is that helpful? Yes, it is. Like these folks out for a jog. And we recommend getting about 30 minutes a day. And like having this gentleman walk 10 minutes after every meal. But this would be maybe a little more vigorous than that when you're trying to get the spine to be in good shape. And so jogging rather than walking could have its benefits, although walking is one of the best exercises. Aerobic exercises include brisk walking, jogging, or swimming. Aerobic exercises get your heart pumping faster. If you cannot do 30 minutes, then do it 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there, 5 minutes here and there. You don't have to do it all at once. In fact, doing it all at once isn't as beneficial as a little here and a little there. Okay, so why did I tell this gentleman to do all these things? Why this list of stuff, oatmeal in the morning, and I hate oatmeal. Why would, why would I? So I'll have to go through this and tell you why I told him to do what I told him to do. Why oatmeal? Well, oatmeal has been shown to be helpful for back pain. In the studies, oatmeal is beneficial. Why? Oatmeal is very good at doing a number of things. One, it's high in fiber, and so it tends to carry cholesterol out of your body, and so it lowers your cholesterol. What's more, if you're eating a lot of oatmeal, you're not eating a lot of other stuff. And I had taken a history of his diet in the process of talking with him, and he was on a average American diet that was fairly high in grease and low in fiber. So this was a good change for him. What about the foods I had him eat, like vegetables, particularly raw? Well, raw vegetables, like salad and so forth, have the benefit of being high in antioxidants, high in omega-3s. Omega-3s are oils that help your blood flow more freely through the blood vessels. And they're high in anti-inflammatory phytochemicals. They reduce inflammation. And so this helps with the back pain. And so I had him particularly take raw vegetables because they would be more nutrient dense than cooked vegetables. And then we talked about fruit for the evening meal, and especially raw fruit. And raw fruit has the benefit of digesting quickly, being high again in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory phytochemicals. I didn't want him to be eating a huge meal at night. You see, if he eats a huge meal at night and then he goes to bed, the meal is still digesting. He lays down. The food is sitting in their stomach right over the spine. The food slowly comes out of the stomach into the bloodstream and settles into the spine. And those blood vessels we're trying to keep open. And so no food should be in the stomach when he goes to bed. Now, what about having him drink ice water for hunger between meals? This is a little hydrotherapy. Hydrotherapy is using hot or cold water for treating different problems. The nature of hydrotherapy is that when you put hot in an area, it tends to draw the blood to that area. The blood vessels dilate. When you put cold in an area, it tends to constrict the blood vessels so that they don't have as much blood flowing through them. So we're putting cold water on the stomach so the blood vessels all constrict, and so the stomach says, oh, I guess I wasn't supposed to be hungry right now. What about all that water? Well, what we were trying to do is get him to rehydrate. Rehydrate for a number of reasons. One, if you have plenty of water on board, it dilutes out any inflammatory process going on, and that's helpful. Number two, it starts getting those discs to start refilling. Now, I doubt they would refill in a week, but we're giving him the best chance we can. And so water is very helpful. So I'll tell you a story about our hospital up in Maine. We had a bunch of employees that were always going to see the doctor, and they were using too much insurance. At least so the CEO was thinking. So he talked to the wellness nurse and said, "What can we do to reduce insurance utilization by our employees?" She said, "Well, let's try something. Let's put bottled water in all the break rooms." And so that's what they did. They put bottled water in all the break rooms. It cost the hospital $25,000 per year to put bottled water in all the break rooms. They would bring around pallets of this. I mean, they even brought it to my office. I could have bottled water in my office, all the doctors' offices, everybody, bottled water, $25,000 a year. But the patients were much healthier. In fact, it reduced insurance utilization by our employees by $240,000 year after year after year. So, big benefits from drinking water. How much water do you need? Well, it depends on how old you are. The older you get, the more water you need. Now, I was having him drink about, 8 glasses, but they were larger than 8 ounces of water per day. And here we have that somebody 19 to 70 should get about, nearly a gallon of water, 3.5 to 4 liters. Do I have to drink that much water? No, this includes all the water you'd get during the day, including the water you'd get from eating watermelon or anything else in your food. And so beyond your food, it's about 8-10 glasses of water to keep up your water needs. Okay, who's this? Morgan Spurlock. You heard of Morgan Spurlock? Morgan Spurlock made a film called Super Size Me. Anybody heard of that film or seen it? Yeah, he put himself on a 30 days McDonald's diet, sort of along the time when 2 teenage girls sued McDonald's in New York for making them obese. And here he is pictured with his French fries sticking out of his mouth as he was going crazy. So I had him eat vegetables, but no excess oils or salt. Excess oil tends to cause that rouleau effect, plugging up the little blood vessels. Excess salt tends to harden the arteries, and that's not helpful. No coffee, tea, sodas, alcohol, tobacco, no eating between meals. Because if you eat between meals, you tend to constantly keep food going into your bloodstream. Now your body needs a chance to rest. We run in cycles. We take a breath, and then we let it out. Our heart beats, and then it has a little rest. We work all day, and we sleep at night. But between your meals, you need a rest time for the system to clean out. It's kind of like, after you eat a meal, you got to wash the dishes. If you just keep eating and stacking up the dishes, pretty soon you run out of dishes or something. Of course, maybe you have plenty of dishes to keep this going for a long time. But anyway, you want to have a clean out period when the blood vessels in the back and everywhere in the body can just have no food flowing through them and open up. What kind of diet is this anyway? Well, this is the Bible diet, the original diet, the in the beginning diet, Genesis. Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you'll eat the plants of the field." So I was kind of putting him on a Genesis diet. Now I also had him take vitamin C. And in the studies, vitamin C has been shown to be helpful for the back. Why? Well, vitamin C is one of the antioxidant vitamins. It's anti-inflammatory to a certain amount. It thins the blood a little bit, just like aspirin. I mean, it's an acid, and so is aspirin, and so it helps thin the blood a little bit. Also, if you don't have vitamin C, what disease do you get? Scurvy. And so scurvy would be a deterioration of the discs in your back and the cartilage in your joints and everything like this. Why only 500 milligrams? Your body can only absorb 500 milligrams at a sitting. All right, how about the walk? We sent him for a walk. Go out and take a walk after each time you have been eating something. Well, it has to do with the pumping action. And by the pumping action, we mean that your discs, they don't have blood vessels to the middle of them, so you have to put a heartbeat in your discs. And so by walking, you are pumping the discs. They've done studies on these discs, feeding people radioactive food, and they've discovered that if they eat radioactive food and they just sit there, the food never makes it to the middle of the disc. The disc is without the food. But if they walk, then it pumps those radioactive food particles to the middle of the disc, and then when those radioactive food particles become part of waste products, it pumps them back out of the disc. But if you don't pump the disc, if you just sit there, you're in trouble. So we want them to pump the discs. Also, if you go outside and take a walk, and I wanted him outdoors, then you're in the fresh air. And when you're in the fresh air, you're getting more oxygen in the bloodstream. And when you have more oxygen in the bloodstream, you're getting more oxygen to the discs. And this is very beneficial to getting those discs to recover. And so I had him go outside. The other thing about going outside, hopefully the sun would be shining and you get some vitamin D. And low vitamin D has been associated with the pain, especially with back pain. And so getting him outside might get him a little more vitamin D. I probably could have offered him to, or asked him to take a vitamin D supplement as well, but we just send him outside. Continuing here, walking outside for stress relief. I mean, you get outdoors and you walk around the countryside or neighborhood or something, you get away from, the income tax that isn't getting done, or whatever. The wife that's beating you, or, whatever. Just kidding. Anyway, stress relief is very important. And so people have found that getting out and away from the stress is helpful, especially if you can get out in nature and look at things and enjoy it. But there's a better stress relief, of course. The ultimate stress relief has to do with letting God have the stress, because He's the one that can really handle it. He says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden." Basically, take your stress to Him, "and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Well, let's talk about George there, our gentleman that came to me. I waited a week and looked at my list of patients, and here he was on the list, and I'm thinking, wonder if he's going to show up. And so it's time for me to go to the waiting room and call him, and hey, he was there, and he was looking pretty stoic. People from Maine are pretty stoic. Anyway, so I asked him to come in, and he walked down the hall, and I kind of watched him and couldn't tell anything. And so we got to the room, and I was kind of bursting with curiosity. Well, did you do it? What happened? So I asked him, I said, well, how you doing? How'd it go? And he says, well, Dr. Clark, he said, within 3 days, I could tell a dramatic difference. My back pain was totally gone. I was feeling so much better that, deep aching that always took all my energy away was gone. I could do things with the kids. He said, but I had a problem. I was always drinking ice water between meals because I was always hungry between meals, and I was always going to the bathroom. He says, I was wide awake though. When I was on breaks at Walmart, everybody else is leaning off and going to sleep and eating their junk food, and here I was wide awake. And I said, well, interesting. And so we talked a little more, and I said, well, I guess there isn't much more to do for you. You're basically fixed, and you did it yourself, and you'll have to expand on your diet. You don't want to eat oatmeal for breakfast the rest of your life. You got to have variety and so forth. But the more you can eat, of a vegetarian diet that's low in fat and low in refined products, the better you'll do. And so he left, and so I thought, well, I should see him back sometime, but what for? Well, about 3 months later, I was going to Walmart, and this was a super Walmart, and I walked over to the vegetable section, and there he was. He was pushing a cart in the vegetable section. I said, hey, how you doing? And he says, oh, Dr. Clark. Oh, well, praise the Lord, I'm doing well. My back's great. I'm finding a new house, though. I'm moving to a new area of town where I can walk better out in the country. It's been doing me so much better. He said, I haven't totally stuck with, the diet program, but I'm eating lots of, fruits and vegetables, but I've been varying it a little bit. So he was doing well. So in summary, hydration is very important because your discs are supposed to be about 70-80% water, and if you don't drink your water, they become 0% water and turn into these hard pancakes and like hard rubber, and then they're painful because that hard rubber has nerves in it. Nutrition is especially important because nutrition is part of keeping the blood vessels open and keeping the blood going to the discs and keeping the best antioxidants reaching the disc. And so that's very important. Exercise is valuable because it keeps pumping the discs so that you get the food to the center of the discs and the waste products away from the disc. It's important for getting the oxygen there, and it's best to exercise outdoors where you have more oxygen. And stress management is very important because there's a lot of psychological connection to be the reason why people have low back pain or neck pain for that matter.